Welcome to the scary dark room. Hey guys, tonight we step into the shadows of true horror stories. Dark accounts whispered from real lives, where the ordinary turned into the unexplainable. These are the stories that follow people home, that stain their memory, and that keep them awake long after the lights go out. Before we get deep into the story, take a moment to like and subscribe to the video, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I'm curious because sometimes knowing the hour makes the darkness feel even closer. The first story begins on a cold evening in a quiet suburban neighborhood. A woman named Claire was driving home late after a long shift at work. The streets were empty, lined with dimly glowing street lamps that flickered as though fighting to stay alive. She was only a few minutes from her house when she noticed something strange. In her rearview mirror, she saw a car following her. At first, she brushed it off, thinking it was just coincidence. But each turn she made, each side street she tried, the car was still there. Its headlights burned into her mirror, washing over her hands that tightened around the steering wheel. Her neighborhood wasn't far, so she decided not to stop. She pulled onto her street, but the car behind her pulled in too. Panic began to rise. Claire's driveway was dark, and her house seemed colder than usual as she finally parked and scrambled to unlock her front door. She didn't even bother closing the blinds. She just rushed inside, her chest pounding. Through the thin curtains, she could see the car idling at the curb, engine still rumbling. Minutes passed, then an hour. Still, the car didn't leave. She tried to call the police, but her phone line was strangely silent, just static on the other end. She grabbed her cell phone, but the battery had died, even though she swore it had been half charged. It felt like the house itself was trying to keep her trapped. Finally, after what felt like eternity, the car's engine shut off. When she peered out, it was gone. Or so she thought. Later that night, just as she was about to drift into sleep, she heard something faint, tires rolling slowly across gravel. She froze, her body stiff, her breath caught. The sound stopped right outside her bedroom window. She forced herself to look, pulling the curtain just an inch. There was no car. Only the faint impression of headlights on her wall, shifting across the room as though invisible beams of light had passed by. The second story comes from a young man named Eric, who rented a small basement apartment while attending college. It was cheap, but it carried a weight, as though the air down there was never fully clean. At night, Eric would sometimes hear scratching from inside the walls. Rats, he thought. The landlord brushed it off the same way. But the noises weren't just scratches, they were whispers. Eric would lie awake, listening as faint voices pressed through the plaster, words he couldn't understand, but tones that were urgent, angry, and close. He tried recording the sounds, but nothing ever appeared on playback. Just silence. One night, the voices grew so loud that he thought someone was in the room with him. He snapped on his light, but the room was empty. Yet the whispering didn't stop. It was now behind him, close enough that he could feel warm breath on his ear. The next morning, he found something that made his stomach twist. On the wall above his bed, written faintly in condensation, as though someone had leaned close and whispered into the paint, were the words, "We see you." He moved out within a week, but still claims that every now and then, when he lies in bed at night, he feels the same breath on his ear. The third story happened to a family who had just bought their dream home, a large 2-story house with a wide porch and tall windows, tucked at the edge of a wooded lot. At first, everything felt perfect, but almost immediately their daughter began to complain of a shadowy man standing at the end of her bed at night. The parents dismissed it as imagination, but soon they began noticing strange things themselves. The sound of someone walking slowly down the hallway when no one was there. Doors that creaked open in the middle of the night. And the windows, they always seemed to be unlocked, even after being checked. One night, the mother woke up to the sound of her daughter screaming. She rushed into the girl's room, only to find her pointing toward the window, eyes wide in terror. "He's outside," the girl whispered, trembling. When the mother looked, she saw nothing. But the next morning, smeared into the glass with a greasy fingerprint, was a single word. Soon. They had the house blessed, changed the locks, even installed security cameras. The cameras would sometimes catch movement, shadows darting across the frame, too fast to be explained. The family finally left after the father woke one night to the sound of breathing in his bedroom. When he turned toward his wife, she was fast asleep. The sound was coming from the other side of the bed, an empty space where something invisible exhaled in the darkness. The last story I'll share tonight happened on a stormy night in 1999. A truck driver named Carl was hauling through the back roads of a rural town. Lightning flashed across the sky, and the rain fell so heavy it blurred the windshield. Up ahead, he saw a woman standing on the roadside, drenched, her arm raised in a desperate wave. Against his instincts, he stopped and offered her a ride. She climbed in, shivering, water dripping from her hair onto the seat. She didn't speak, only nodded when he asked where she was headed. He drove in silence, stealing glances at her pale face. At last, he pulled up to a small house she had pointed toward. But when he turned to let her out, the passenger seat was empty. His skin crawled, the damp imprint still fresh on the seat. He knocked on the door of the house, shaken, and an elderly man answered. When Carl explained what had happened, the man's face grew pale. He said that his daughter had died years ago in a car accident on that very road during a storm. And that night, like so many others, she was still trying to find her way home. These stories linger because they are not easily dismissed. A stranger's headlights in the night, whispers from the walls, shadows at the foot of your bed, or the pale face of someone long gone. They are reminders that sometimes what we fear is not just imagination, but something that watches us from the other side of the dark. If this story chilled you, don't forget to subscribe to the Scary Darkroom for more terrifying tales. And remember, tonight, when you lie in bed and the room grows still, listen carefully. Sometimes the dark listens back.